I want to introduce Roy Patterson of Prompt. Roy, how are you today? Oh, you might want to unmute real quick.
There we go. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
I'm doing great. It's kind of interesting though, because I do presentations all day. This is what I do all day. I present to prospective clients and still getting on these big meetings. I guess I still get a little bit nervous. So appreciate you guys having me. I'm really excited to share a little bit about kind of the things that we've identified as important metrics for businesses to track.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just want to check, would you like me to still drive with slides today for you?
Yeah, that'd be great. I was running into some issues with PowerPoint, so that'd be super helpful.
No worries. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And then whenever you're ready, just let me know and
I
we
love it.
can you
We
see
have
it?
Candace here as well, which good to see you, Candace. Also, too, I would love this to be super engaging. Again, I can certainly talk to you all, but I know that you all can't talk back to me. So if you guys do and want to participate, just kind of participate in the chat. That tends to be really helpful. But I think the most important thing for today is kind of just sharing kind of some metrics that we've identified as a business that are really important for you all to track to help with growth, help with kind of just ongoing maintenance of your practice. A little bit of context for my background. I've been in the PT space or in the therapy space for a little over 9 years. I worked for another vendor for a long period of time, worked in the hospital space for a period of time, and realized that my passion really lied in PT. And so that's kind of why I'm here and been with Prompt for a little over 2.5 years and are a senior account executive here with the team. So work with practices similar to you all in regards to evaluating our software and kind of how we can provide value to your business. But I don't think that the purpose of today's presentation is promoting Prompt, but more of just showcasing the type of metrics and reporting capabilities that are really available in the market. Whether you're getting that today in your current EMR or whether you're looking for that in prospective EMRs, there's a lot of opportunities there. So just jumping forward from here, I mean, there's really three primary ways to increase your revenue. It's pretty straightforward. More patient visits, more revenue per visit, and more visits per plan of care. And so when we say visits per plan of care, it's meaning that, tracking your visits per discharge and how often your patients are coming in. We have some visuals within this to be able to kind of showcase some of the metrics that we provide within Prompt in regards to managing this. Awesome, Wanda. Um, and so we're just trying to provide, and I think a lot of vendors in the space are just providing you tools and the visibility into things that maybe fallen a little bit short, but also maybe the things that are going really, really well and how you can continue to make sure that those things continue to happen. Are most practices today tracking your, visits per, number of visits that you're seeing on a month-to-month basis, under like cancellations, things like that? And feel free to jump into the comments. Yeah, perfect. That's awesome. And I see the comments filling up. Great. And what I would love to do as well as we're going through this is I'm going to go through these five to seven different metrics that we've identified as important metrics to track. I'd also love to hear if I'm missing anything, if there's some reports that you guys are managing today that you have found really impactful for your business. Would love for to share that. So feel free to start popping some of those into the chat, just so I can understand kind of what you all are managing, and then we can kind of work through those. Also, love all of the positive feedback regarding Prompt. And Lauren, feel free to shoot to the next slide. So I think a lot of the goal too is making sure that we're providing insight into, making major impacts to your business doesn't have to be anything dramatic, right? It doesn't have to be anything that you're changing everything that you're doing. It's providing small incremental changes to make massive improvements to your business. So as I'm going on calls every day, I'm talking about all the changes that Prompt can implement, and I'm sure other vendors are doing the same thing. But ultimately, what we're trying to showcase is that a small change can really increase a significant amount of your bottom line. So an example here is that let's say we pretended we had 100 patients. They were getting 10 visits per plan of care, which equated into 1,000 total visits and $100 per visit. So that would equate into $100,000 in revenue across those patients, right? Obviously, for a lot of these businesses at scale, this is a small number, right? It's going to be a much larger number, but it gives you insight into kind of how do you get to that revenue number. If you just click that one more time, Lauren. From here, right, incremental changes to this can make massive improvements, right? So if I was able just to increase, let's say, one visit per discharge, right? One visit per discharge for this patient, right? It can equate into large numbers. Also, if I was increasing my revenue per visit, right? So as you see here, we didn't change a lot. There was a change here that was made. We had the same number of patients, but we increased their visits per plan of care. We increased the total number of visits because of that. And we also made some changes in regards to increasing our revenue per visit. That equated into an over $15,000 increase in revenue for the clinic over just a very small change. And so a lot of the time when we're having conversations about, well, how does Prompt or how does any vendor provide value to your business? It's taking a step back and realizing that, yes, there's costs associated with an EMR, but understanding that the value that the solution can provide. And so I think oftentimes taking a step back and realizing that, I don't need to see a $500,000 increase in revenue. How do I provide small actionable changes that create long-term benefits, right? How do I make sure that patients are staying longer? How do I drive down my cancellation rate? And if I am getting cancels, how do I fill them quickly? That all equates. How do I code and do better coding optimization so that the codes that I'm billing are getting reimbursed at a higher rate? Those are all really influential things that can make major impacts to your business. Next slide. So some of the metrics that we have identified as key pieces that can drive these types of changes are right here listed below. And I'll start with the first one being the plan of care compliance. So next slide. So I don't know that every vendor provides visibility into this, but it is something that Prompt provides. And I think it's a really important metric to track. And so when I talk about this in any of the meetings that I'm having, groups get confused because plan of care compliance is kind of just tied to, well, is it progress note tracking? Is it tracking when my plan of care is expiring? Which those are certainly important things to track. And I think most vendors are providing insight into that. But I think what's more important to track is, are the patients that I'm sending plan of cares for actually being scheduled and coming in for those visits? Right? So let's say, for example, I say, hey, I need to see a patient twice a week for the next 5 weeks, so 10 visits. If they're not scheduled to that plan of care, as a business, I want to know that. And I don't want it to be one of my staff members' responsibility to have to go scramble through schedules every single week. Right? I just want to be able to be alerted about what these things are providing to me. And so what a lot of systems out there will provide is insight into that compliance around that. So visibility around making sure that they're adhering to that from a scheduling perspective. What's also a big piece with this is plan of care compliance, or patients that are not adhering to their plan of care, is directly correlated to patients self-discharging, right? Patients that are not buying in their plan will just self-discharge at a substantially higher rate. Crazy industry average is that 50% of your patients will self-discharge before their fourth visit. And I don't think that's necessarily because they're not, interested in treatment. I think that there's just a little bit of education on the front end to continue to re-implement how important it is that they follow through with this plan. How important it is to not just feel a little bit better, but actually get back to prior level of function. So what we have identified, or just what an important metric to track for your business is, are patients actually following through with this plan of care? And if they're not, how do I make sure that they do that? So a couple of ways to do that is leverage tools within your current EMR to do that, so that you can be alerted proactively when patients are under scheduled to their plan of care. But another thing is if you don't have that tool, maybe you leverage like a workflow with your staff to say, hey, every Monday or every Tuesday, I'm going through a list of patients in their plan of care and making sure that they're actually scheduled to that. That will provide tremendous benefit because, again, by doing so, patients are less likely to self-discharge and patients are more likely to follow through with that plan of care, which is going to then, in return, increase your visits per discharge. We're in a model today in this healthcare setting where it's fee for service, right? We're incentivized to treat patients. As things shift, this model might change a little bit. But again, right, we are wanting to make sure that our patients are following through with those care plans that are being actually approved by the referring physician and being recommended by the therapist. Does anyone track this today? Is this a metric that most are tracking? Amy, this report within Prompt, again, not trying to promote Prompt a ton, but what we provide within Prompt is the plan of care compliance within your dashboard. There's a card within the dashboard that you can click into that will show you all of your patients that are under scheduled to their plan of care. And if you have any questions, if there's any Prompt users on this call, if you have questions, feel free. I can provide you guys some insight in regards to connecting with me or connecting with any members of our support team. But for anyone that's not a Prompt user, are you all tracking this? Is there's ways that you all are managing patients that are not adhering to their plans of care? Wonderful. And it's quite common, right? A lot of what we hear is that groups are managing this on spreadsheets, and there's a lot of spreadsheet wizards out there. I am not one of them, which is why I have great resources on my team to manage a lot of those things for me. But again, you can manage a lot of these things outside of the software. It is a little bit more manual and redundant. But again, it's making sure that you have these insights and making sure that you have this nailed down because it can really go a long ways. Next slide, please. With this as well, kind of building off of making sure that patients are scheduling to their plan of care, that then in turn drives directly into making sure that your schedules remain full. So capacity utilization is a really great report. Groups will manage this as like a productivity report. So it tracks to make sure that, hey, we as a business have X number of hours available. How much of that is scheduled? One. And how much of that is actually being arrived with patients? So it's really helpful in understanding how you're going to continue to grow your business, or if your business is in trouble and we need to focus on particular ways. Maybe it's patient satisfaction, maybe it's other things. So it's not necessarily to say hire and fire, but it's to understand, hey, when we need to hire more therapists. So I can see here with this diagram that I provided within the PowerPoint here is that I can see that we have over 10,000 available hours in capacity, but we're filled about 9,500 of them. So we're doing a great job. But I can also see that the arrival rate's a little bit below that. So we do have some cancellation rates that are coming into play. But I think what's really important too is obviously seeing that globally. I want to see that global number of how we're performing there. But more importantly too is being able to be very granular with that so that I can understand, okay, well, here's where we are as a business, but how does that then trickle down into my providers? Because maybe there's some outliers and maybe there's some really tough conversations that we need to have to understand why therapists are not scheduled to the same capacity as the average of the clinic. So I picked on myself here. Here's a great example. You can see most of the therapists are doing a pretty good job in regards to their total capacity and actually being scheduled to that. But you can see here, fourth or fifth line down, myself, I have a ton of capacity and I'm very little filled to that. So that's a problem. And it's not to say that we're here to pick on therapists. It's more to say that therapists will have visibility into their performance. So do most of you all track your capacity utilization and how your schedules are full within your current EMR? Or if you're not using EMR on paper? And I'll let some of these kind of flood in, which is just helpful for me to be able to see that. Okay. And that's completely fine. Again, is if it's manual, if it's automated, it doesn't matter as long as we're tracking this, because again, small changes to these particular areas will make long-term benefits to your business. So what I think is really important is if you're not doing it today, tracking what your capacity is as a clinic and being very deliberate with what those numbers are. So not only what the available time is, but how are we making sure that this information is accurate? Do we have a standing, team meeting that happens every Tuesday and Thursday that is maybe altering what the actual available time is? Make sure that that's being excluded from your productivity numbers. Um, with this, if we are tracking our productivity, how do we look at this again, very detailed on a provider level, so that when you have those weekly, quarterly, monthly reviews with your patients or with your providers, understanding that, hey, we are at 95% capacity as a clinic, you're at 75%. I want to find creative ways that we can get this increase for you. Why is your Friday so much emptier than everyone else's? Why is your cancellation rate higher than everyone else's and we're not filling those? Right? Understanding what's the driving factor, and that then goes into maybe patient satisfaction. It's a full trickle effect, but providing those metrics that you can back into those things will allow you to continue to improve your business. Awesome. Next slide. Visits per discharge. Um, I would say personally, I think this is one of the most important metrics you can track as a business owner, especially in the fee-for-service model that we live in today. If we're at a low visits per discharge, our revenue is low because patients are leaving early. And so understanding what that is extremely important, because not only do I want to, again, see that globally as a clinic, which I can see in this diagram here, we're doing a pretty good job. We're at 12.7 visits per discharge. that's good. If this was at 9 or 8 or 7, I'm concerned at this point. But I think the industry average for visits per discharge, you want to be somewhere between like 12, 14, maybe 18 visits per discharge. Again, also that's going to be depicted based off of discipline, right? Your pediatric clinics are going to be certainly significantly higher for the patients that are staying, for those kiddos that are staying 6, 12 months. But for the ones that, if you're just like a standard ortho PT outpatient, right? If we're in that 12 to 14 range, we're feeling pretty good. But why this is such an important metric is it tells you so much about the health of your business. Because if your visits per discharge is low, there's something going on there that's driving that. And it could be a couple of things, right? It could be satisfaction, right? It could be your patient satisfaction. And as a show of hands, everyone just feel free to jump into the chat. How many of you all are tracking your guys' NPS score? And if you're not familiar with NPS score, just say that and I'll certainly provide you guys a little bit of background about what NPS is. Love that, Michael. Awesome. Let's see if I see a no in here. I've seen a bunch of yeses, which is really great. No, but we just talked about it. Perfect. So just for context for everyone in regards to what NPS stands for Net Promoter Score. As simplest way to explain this to you all is it's a satisfaction survey. How likely would you recommend a friend or colleague to the practice, right? It's broken down into 3 buckets. So 9s and 10s are your promoters, 7 and 8 are your passives, and 6 and below are your detractors. So your score is made up of your percentage of promoters minus your percentage of detractors. So positive score, obviously good. Negative score, pretty bad, right? The problem with a lot of groups and how satisfaction surveys are managed is they send it out post-discharge. Problem with post-discharge is we just missed all the patients that self-discharge and why they self-discharge. So what NPS does a really good job with a lot of vendors in the space is that you can send it out at whatever cadence you like. So let's say after the first visit, the 4th visit, the 7th visit, at discharge, right? I know now I get that constant influx of feedback from my patients. So I can understand how they're perceiving the care that's being provided. And why I bring that up is because if I see that my visits per discharge is trending low as a clinic or by an individual provider, I can then look into that satisfaction surveys and say, okay, well, are patients leaving early because they're dissatisfied? And you can go through the comments, you can see what they're leaving, what are they saying, right? Maybe it's about me and they're like, it was really great meeting with Roy, but he was on his phone the whole time. He wasn't really paying attention to me. I felt like he was, more just trying to get me out of the clinic than actually provide me the services I needed, right? Those are things that I can improve on, right, and make actionable changes. So that's kind of the first lever that you're going to pull on if we're looking at visits per discharge and we're looking and seeing that's a little bit low. The other one could be that maybe our therapists are just so good that they're getting patients better faster, which is actually a common thing that can happen. But it's understanding and, again, probably having a conversation with that therapist about what they're delivering, what they're providing to the patients, how much of this, progression is being made at home with HEPs, understanding that area. So it's just important to track that number globally. But again, I think, it's really important for businesses to be really detailed in drilling into what's driving this global number on an individual basis. Next slide, please. Units per visit. So close second to, I think, visits per discharge. If we're just talking about revenue growth as a business, units per visit is going to be that. I tied this directly into coding optimization because groups can be really good with their units per visit, but they can be terrible with their coding optimization. They can still see that their business is not profitable, right? Because they're billing the wrong codes, right? If your therapists are constantly billing TheraX rather than TheraAct, right, that might not be increasing your bottom line quite as much. So tracking your units per visit is important. Probably for most ortho, outpatient clinics, you're going to want to be somewhere between like 3.9 to like 4.2 units per visit. Certainly could trend a little bit low. Again, making sure that we can look at this by payer, by provider, by patient population, look at however you want, but understanding what those numbers are. And then taking it a step further beyond just the units per visit, but drilling into how we're actually billing these out. Do any of you all currently manage like at what frequency your therapists are billing out therapeutic exercises compared to NeuroRehab, compared to TheraAct or manual therapy? Is that something that anyone tracks today? Most are yes. That's great. Perfect. So a couple knows, which is completely fine. If that's just something that is not available within your current EMR, something to note. But I think why that's important is as you look at most fee schedules with most insurances, therapeutic exercises um, are therapeutic exercise is reimbursed at a rate of about, I think it's like $6 to $8 less than therapeutic activities. But in most instances, as long as we're justifying why this was a functional exercise, which most therapeutic exercises can be billed as their act, as long as we're documenting that, it's going to equate to about, again, $6 to $8 more. So it's important to be able to see into that so that if I can see that my therapists are billing out therapeutic exercises more than they should, we can have that conversation during that team meeting to have a conversation around that. I don't know if they present already or if they're presenting later. I saw Kelly is here for Prediction Health. This is something that Prediction Health does an exceptional job. Also in tandem with Prompt, we provide visibility there, and I know a lot of other vendors do as well. But just kind of shouting out Prediction Health, that's a lot of what Prediction Health is driving in regards to their analytic management is making sure that you're implementing those appropriate changes for your staff, not only reactionary, but proactively as your therapist are documenting. Prediction Health has integrations with a lot of the EMRs in the space to provide that proactive management so that your therapist can bill more efficiently and you can collect more. Not to shout out Prediction Health, but I have nothing but positive things to say about what they're doing. And I'm sure Kelly will share more about that if she hasn't already. Next slide, please. Cancellation rate. This is probably one that's quite frustrating for most business owners. It's inevitable. There's no way around it. Patients will cancel visits. We can provide tools to help drive that down. Like a lot of vendors in the space will provide online scheduling. Data supports that patients that schedule online will cancel about 35% less, which is a positive. Also, too, we've identified that the most convenient time for patients to schedule is between 4 and 8 p.m. on a Sunday. What I can tell you is that most clinics aren't open at that time. So being able to leverage some type of online scheduling will really help drive down that cancellation rate. But as I mentioned, cancellation rates are inevitable. They're going to continue to happen. And understanding that is important, but making sure that we have plans to make sure that when the cancellation happens, we can get those filled is really, really important. Does everyone on this call leverage some sort of wait list today to help backfill cancellations when they do happen? See mostly yeses, a couple nos. Why I ask that is wait lists are very helpful. I know people have some groups have love-hate relationships with their wait list because they feel like they're a little bit manual, which is fine. Again, I think there's ways, there's vendors out there that do really good jobs, and maybe there's some ways that you're managing it manually on spreadsheets. Why I think a cancellation or why I think a wait list is extremely important is understanding that cancellations are just going to happen is one thing, but making sure that we have a plan that it's not impacting revenue is another thing. And so, not to say that we're going to backfill every cancellation, but if I could backfill 50, 70, 80%, I'm not as upset that I'm at that 10, 12, 14% cancellation rate, as long as I have a way to fill those so that's not impacting my bottom line. So a lot of vendors in the space will provide those wait lists that you can find those patients that are looking for that particular time that opened up. Some vendors will provide the opportunity to send out online scheduling links to them so they can just actually schedule directly there. Other options are you can call those patients and get them scheduled. But again, driving down that cancellation is one thing, but also having that tactful way to get them filled is another. So I think the industry average right now, again, it will vary by discipline. I think pediatrics is a little bit higher. But anywhere from like 12 to like 14 to 18% is kind of that industry average. So if you're right in that area, good for you. You're doing fine. I think this has been driven up a little bit through the pandemic. I think that there's just been the understanding that maybe it's more accepted to cancel visits, which I don't think is the case. But also true to another piece to help drive these down is implementing appropriate policies around this. I know there's kind of a fine line of managing those cancellation policies. You don't want to be super strict on it because, again, it's relationship management with these patients. But understanding when you're putting together these intake forms for your patients with those different policies that you all have, being clear with what your policies are around cancellations and no-shows, if there's fees associated to that, kind of how that impacts ongoing treatment with them, is really important to really, again, help drive that down that cancellation. I think that's it. What I would love, I think I'm going to stretch this because I have 4 minutes. I would love to just hear from anyone else. I know that there's probably a ton more metrics that we're tracking. I think that those are really important ones if we're just focused on revenue, and increasing profitability within the clinic. What are some metrics that I missed that you are interested in or hearing more about, or I'm just intrigued to hear what you all as businesses are managing, that you feel like has been really helpful? Yep. Jim, that is exactly a metric. I was just talking to my team yesterday. It's a really great metric to track. Visits per discharge is one, visits per unit and per hour is another really good one. Yep. Jody, that's great as well. Yep. Referral conversion rate, that's a really good one. That's something that I think is a gap with a lot of systems, is making sure that you're managing your actual conversion rate from the referrals. But yeah, really important to track how many of those referrals that you're actually getting from your physicians are converting into patients. Does Prompt offer the billing side and track longevity of reimbursement? Tiffany, yes. And I think that once we hop off, or once we kind of conclude this, I think there might be a poll that will pop up that will, if you're interested in learning more, I can absolutely provide you, put together some time and provide you a little bit more context on kind of what things are provided within Prompt. Well, I think we're close to time. I want to thank everyone for listening to my 30-minute spiel. If there's any questions as with this just popped up, let us know. We're more than happy to help. And again, yeah, I know also too, I'll just chime in. For everyone that was hoping to see Mike and ended up seeing me, I apologize. Mike had a personal matter that he had to actually attend to. But again, so great to speak to everyone. So great to hear how you guys are managing your business. And Chad and yeah, thank you so much for having me on the call.